Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of the remote work panel with Kennie, Tonya, Mark, and Darrick. We'll continue to talk about the lived experience of being a remote worker, the pros, the cons, and really, frankly, why we like it. If you didn't catch part 1 yet, I encourage you to go back and find the previous episode, which is part 1 with a panel. Some really good discussion there, but let's carry on today and finish out the episode with part 2. Thanks everybody for listening. How often do you need to get together with your people, whatever your people are, for you personally? And sort of what do you miss maybe kind of about like not being able to sort of be together all the time? I'll give you a silly one for me. Like I used to jump up to the whiteboard at the drop of a hat. I just wanted to draw something. And God bless Microsoft Whiteboard, but there's nothing like the smell of a good, wipe off marker and having the color palette and the arrows and the squares. I miss that. So that's something I miss. But anyway, talk a little bit more about like how often you like to get together with your team, what those look like, and then sort of something you miss about being with people all the time.
I'd like to add another word in there with affinity. Now, it's a tremendous word to use, trust. I think that's very important as well, especially in a remote environment, right? Because it takes a while to build that trust, and I think that's got to be there. So you do have to pay attention to those factors.
Yeah.
Maybe I can start. So with our engineering org, we do have people living in Japan or different places in Europe, and the offices in Denmark, Lyngby. So I'm the odd one out because I'm just here for a year. I'll get back. I still miss my team. I still miss conversations, especially the ones where you wait for the coffee to go through and someone drops by and you ask, what was it about blah? And then suddenly we realize that maybe we could do something smart there. These chance encounters is something I'm not getting. And as a PM program manager, that's part of what my job is to listen to everyone, including the engineers, and kind of see how we can leverage this into features and product. But for our engineers, I think that they typically come into the office at least once a year, or depending on travel budget, maybe once every second year, and spend a week in Lyngby and get together and go out with the team and work together. And these are the places where people book the meetings to go into the meeting rooms and work physically together on the hard problems.
Yeah, once a year in that case. How about you guys? Anyone else?
My current client does that where they once a year get together and, we're remote across the U.S. They fly everybody in. That was huge because the first time I got to do that, it was great to actually, I've been working with people for close to a year just because of how I timed my getting on that client, and the affinity gain by in-person interaction. I think it was like 3 or 4 days. We were just all together, dinners out together, really bonded the team well together. So, I think like yearly or twice a year, depending geography and cost of that. I thought that was a good cadence and a really valuable idea.
Where I'm at currently, I think we're on like a 2-year cadence of getting the whole team together. Where I worked previously, it was every 6 months. So for me, I'm just like 100% remote all the time, pretty much.
Okay.
So
that would be fine with you. You could build all the team trust. I think that's fair. I think we're in that age where now that's possible.
But I definitely like having, the banter chats, or I'm now working with a couple different people on my team that I haven't worked with before. So trying to learn about them and share things about, what am I doing? So they all know I'm on the pod right now. And so talking about what are my cats up to? So like pets are an easy thing that people can relate to. So the one was asking me, do you think we could start like a pets teams channel where we could drop pictures. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. And he was so excited about it. He has a 7-month-old puppy. And we were on a meeting today, and someone that like never has his camera on, turned his camera on because he wanted to show me his dog. And I'm like, this is awesome.
Terrific.
Tonya just hit on something critical there. I just got to back up, though. Well, I don't even know where to start now. I've got like 3 things in mind. We get together as a team roughly 3 times a year, and it's a pretty good cadence. But the camera being on, let's talk about that for a second. It's interesting, right? Does anybody mandate it in their organization? No. Like, I do think it is critical to have it on, and it's uncomfortable at first, and I think you can get used to it. Most people I think can, but I really think it's critical to see the person. Yeah.
I think it depends on what type of meetings we're talking about. Because if it's the team meetings where it's a social interaction, yes. But if it's the status meetings or something else, I tend to kind of put my camera on when I'm speaking, and maybe when I zone out, and because the conversation is going, like, these are some of the conversations in my team is like intricate details in how the garbage collection works in the server and .NET, and I don't need to, I don't want to, and it is too much detail for me. So for these conversations, sometimes I zone out and then I turn off the camera and maybe do something else.
Yeah, I'm a camera on guy unless there's a good reason not to. Maybe that's a good one that Kenny mentioned. Like, if you're going to eat your lunch because you can and you don't want to have people watch you eat, say that. But I prefer when people join with their cameras on and then say, I'm going to do a thing, like, perfect. I'll tell you what really gripes me is, like, I had a vendor pitch some technology to me and my client the first time we're ever meeting them. 3 of them were on the sales team. Nobody turned their camera on. I was like, and that was just weird. I thought that was kind of weird.
Right.
Yeah.
But when again, in COVID, we were sort of in my department breaking the barrier on what, like, video and remote culture was going to be. And I mandated as a leader that unless you need to, cameras on, because otherwise it's a phone call and we're talking over each other. We are picking up on signals on this call all the time about who's, these little, like, Kenny wants to talk. Oh, Tonya's got something to say. And when you turn it off, if it's off all the time, I'm against it for sure.
Yeah.
What do you think, Darrick?
The one thing you're saying, Kenny, I think is a good point I was thinking about, my current client doesn't really have camera on mandates, and nobody does. It's almost frowned upon. And I have those experiences of a call that's not germane to what you're talking about, and like it kind of lets you multitask. But my other thought to that is sometimes I think that gives everyone a cue, if the camera's on, that maybe I should take this discussion offline. I've got all these faces looking at me, waiting for, like, listening to what I'm saying, and maybe to read those cues of, gosh, this is not interesting to half the audience here. I should probably wrap it up, take it to a separate group. So sometimes I think if you need cameras off, sometimes it's a good tell that maybe you need to split your meetings up, make them smaller, make them shorter, because holding your attention like that does feel too long if it's not about you.
True.
In the world of, like, instant gratification, like the constant stimulus of I have to be, like, it has to be engaging, it has to be exciting, and the constant multitasking as well. Like, I find if my camera's on, I'm going to pay more attention because I don't want someone watching me, seeing me, typing an email or playing with the cats or whatever. Granted, the cats, add to the meetings. I was in a meeting the other day and he was, like, decided he wanted to sit on my shoulder and all this stuff. So they can be a distraction. But I think if I'm more engaged by having my camera on, especially as a consultant working with my clients, it shows my clients that I'm engaged in the work that I'm doing with them, and it helps me build a better relationship with them as well.
It does take a discipline when you're involved in meetings, right, to pay attention, because what happens when we're looking at our camera on Teams in the meeting? We got Outlook dinging at us and all these emails coming in, and we got other Teams messages popping up, and there's all this competition for our attention. So Yeah, I've noticed that internally, right? You get a little bit deep on a particular subject, you lose somebody, and then you got to get them back and so forth. So it does take some discipline. But I want to go back to Kenny mentioned a really good point on you're waiting for the coffee to come through, somebody comes up, the brainstorming, the creativity in that moment, because you're both focused on right then and there and not focused on the inbox and the Teams messages and everything else, right? You're separated. I've always struggled with that because I do recognize, having worked in the office before, those moments that happen and how powerful and constructive they can be. Trying to recreate that in a virtual environment is pretty difficult, and I've never really cracked that. And I'm interested in if anybody else has what the secret is there.
I think this leads me to something that I was inspired by Tonya's, some of the things Tonya said, also about belonging. I think for me, when I'm more remote like I am right now, I also tend to do more social media and like extending my team to the world or to the community. I don't know if you feel the same, but I mean, I've had great conversations with Tonya over email or Teams or LinkedIn, and I think for me, so that's getting back to you, Mark, on the how to get the water cooler. I get a different type of water cooler chit chat with social media, especially here remote. So it's just it's not so much my coworkers, but it's the Tonyas of the world, and where I suddenly there's a comment here and there, and we do some ping pong. We might even take it over email, and suddenly there's a new feature. Tonya's tried that a couple of times.
Right.
So I think that's I don't know how the rest of you if you do more social media when you work from home.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it's a great point. I do a little bit. Let me jump into that thread, and we can see where you guys want to go with this. But I think that one of the things about the changing the way we work and rethinking work is kind of what I call the email to chat to spontaneous video call chain, which I don't think people use enough. Like if you see an email and you don't understand it, look for that person on Teams. Oh, they're available. Say, got a sec? Yeah. Boom, call them. And in a way, I know it's not quite the same as the coffee machine or the water cooler, but like the more we can use the tools to just say, like, I want to talk to this person right now, and we jump on a quick call. It's like, hey, I read your email and I've got a question about what you said. I don't want to like reply to everybody about it, but or just using the tools to say, man, I just had a great idea. I want to run that by Darrick. Oh, he's available. Hey, can I call you? For the record, when we talk about etiquette, like accepting meetings, you should always say, I know you're green, but do you have a second? Like, don't just like jam a
Don't
video
cold call
call them.
Yeah.
Don't cold call them. I mean,
Sure.
that's such a boomer. That's such a boomer move. I would do that for sure. I'm always calling my kids on the phone and they're like, you can't text? What's this?
And a wish list item.
Anyway.
And a wish list item too is, can you tell me what it's about? Like, do you have a second to talk about this new component?
No, not for me. I'm just going to say, I want to, podcast, I want to spring it on you.
You like to spring it on you, yeah.
Yeah, I like to spring it on. Anyway, so like, I think this is like now we're talking about the intersection of how we work with technology and how to use it correctly and how to like make ourselves be spontaneous and jump on 5-minute calls and see each other and bat things through a little bit. It doesn't replace the kind of the random positive collisions in the office. I get that. But we can get pretty close, I think, if we take that approach. And I think sometimes people say, I'm going to schedule you for a 30-minute meeting. And we're talking about like, don't do that. Like, let's talk now and use those tools, I think. And the channels, Kenny brings up an interesting point. We've got LinkedIn messaging, Teams messaging, emails, other social media channels to sort of replace some of these things. What are your thoughts on all that?
First of all, I'll say one thing. Stop the hello in Teams. Like, I want to support Darrick here. If you're going to reach out on anything, like put a little bit of context into that first hello, right? So that's some etiquette that I think we are getting there. But that just helps. If I see a Teams message that I don't have time for right now, at least I know the context or no context. But a hello is like okay. Really.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you there? I love that. That's
No.
perfect. Well done. Anything like
Although,
so we're drifting into sort of like the techniques and approaches to sort of being successful. Go ahead, Mark.
so my personal image consultant leads a Teams message to me with exactly that. You're there, you're free, something, because they know oftentimes I'm on a presentation, I'm in a meeting, something, right? And they don't want to just go barging in with, like, did you take the chicken out of the freezer to defrost, right? Don't want that showing up when I'm doing a demo. So,
By the way, let's stipulate personal image consultants can do whatever they want. They can say hello question mark. They can knock on the door.
that's very
Totally,
true.
there's an exemption there for anything. And if your personal image consultant is using Teams, good on her.
Yeah.
Who else has thoughts on sort of these like techniques and sort of like how we interact with each other via technology?
I was just going to say one thing that we talk about. We lose some things with remote, like some of the water cooler, the unintentional interactions. One thing I think we gain and where the ergonomics are actually better is like when we work with code and doing code reviews, it is such a better experience to do a one-on-one Teams call, share a screen of code. There's no finger on your monitor. I know it's a pet peeve of you, David, of the right? Like the ergonomics are actually a lot better for some of these things remotely than they would be sharing cubicles next to each other.
That's a great point.
The best thing about remote work is nobody's touching my screen anymore.
Yeah.
That is the best thing. We used to have a common colleague, and he'd say, "Hey, what's this thing?" He wouldn't get his finger 1/4 of an inch from the screen. It would go all the way to doink. And be like, "Why?"
What's
Why
even
was
better
it-
is when it's a touch screen too. I'm like,
yeah.
why did you just click everything?
Love it. Hey, in the interest of time, this is great stuff. I'd like to give you guys an opportunity to say something, ask the group a question. I essentially have one sort of surprisey wrap-up question that's going to maybe stretch you and make you think about things a little bit. But like, what would you want to tell people, or what would you want to ask each other about just this new world of remote work? Anything that we haven't covered? Ready, set, go.
I think for me, the hardest challenge is maintaining my work-life balance, and especially as someone who is a high performer. And then I'm also a community contributor, so I enjoy writing blogs and giving back to the community and preparing presentations and having that social media presence of interacting on LinkedIn or being part of a group chat with other MVPs around the world where that thing is blowing up at all hours of the day.
Right.
How do you make time to disconnect and but also, if you decide to turn off all your notifications, do you feel like you missed something really important, or how do you maintain that work-life balance? I think, Kenny, you recently posted on LinkedIn about how you were trying to maintain your work-life balance.
Correct. Yeah. I work with people in Denmark, in Australia, in Japan, in the US, West and East Coast. So there is an opportunity to be always on.
Yeah, that's 24 hours.
And I recently realized that my workaholism turned out to be something where I realized this is not healthy. It was actually during a conversation. We were invited with friends to Thanksgiving, and my friend here in Fargo asked me, "So, Kenny, what are your hobbies?" And I was like, I thought about it, and then I was just saying, I just work. Like I have our dog, I have my family, but I was just working too many hours, too much, and stretching from normal work into LinkedIn, which for me is also very much related to work, just a different type of interactions. So I recently, for my sanity and health, decided that late afternoon I turn off email and Teams on my computer, and 6:00 evening there's no more LinkedIn on the phone or anything. So it's just to give my brain some break time. and no weekends, by the way. That's also it's 2 weeks, so it's rarely new, but I'm feeling already that I'm sleeping better and getting a better balance in my life of other things. And then I needed to take up a different hobby, so I've done that.
Inspiring. Who else wants to answer Tonya's question about work-life balance?
I realized a while back there's always going to be something to do. My to-do list just grows and grows and grows. That's just the function of work nowadays. And it doesn't matter how many late nights I put in. I'm never going to get to the bottom of it. So you got to do it. And I think that's something everybody should feel comfortable in saying. Look, you got to figure out what works best for you and how to work. And some people don't like remote work, have to be surrounded, have to be focused, have to get out of the house, whatever the case may be. Okay, some need it, maybe at part time, and some are very comfortable with it, like us. Great, you got to figure that out. Something I've shared with people over the years when they ask about, how do I work at home and so forth. The kids are no longer here, but when we had kids in the house, if dad's office doors are closed, something better be on fire for you to knock on that door. That was just the rule we laid down, and it worked fantastically. So, and I was conscious when I wasn't in a particularly sensitive meeting, or I'm just, working in general, I'd open up the door and they knew they could come in and ask me a question if they need to. But you got to establish those boundaries for sure.
Darrick, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, the first kind of, you talked about sort of that proto work from home, where before it was work from home and you'd bring your laptop home and work at the kitchen table. That really bled into work-life balance for me. And having having an office, it's our second or spare bedroom, that this is where I work. Because even if you do need to work long hours, you feel like you need to go in, there's just a boundary, there's a physical boundary. And I think that really helps. And it makes you feel like I've been in here all day, I need to get out, I need to separate that. And versus if you are bringing a laptop around, and sometimes that's a great ability to have, but I think that keeping it confined to a physical space has helped me a lot.
Yeah, interesting. Really I like to move around my house a lot. I find I sort of am antsy, so I'll work in 4 different rooms in a week just to sort of move around. But let me take the work-life balance in a different direction. And
Sorry, Dave, can I just tag on to that real quick? I really wanted to say this, and I just for simplicity and everything. I'm usually in my house, but I've discovered over the years, if I go work someplace else for the day, right? Some days we'll go camping, and I'll work for a day while we're camping. What an incredible difference that is. I am so productive because I'm in a different environment, and something about that allows me to just really focus, and I get so much done when I'm able to do that. So anybody that's working remotely, if you've never just picked up, and I'm not talking about a coffee shop, I'm talking about a different work environment someplace else, it's a huge production boost. Yeah. Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
No, terrific. Let me take it in a slightly different direction, acknowledging that I don't work for a corporation. I work for myself. I've got multiple clients. I've got sort of holes in my day. And I think what you guys are saying about work-life balance is so important just for working in America, whether you're in an office or remote, and remote being a little bit more tricky because you can always be on. I really appreciate that. But I find that I can do things during my day that I want to do. Sometimes I'm helping some other people. Sometimes I'm running errands, and I can choose to work at 8 o'clock at night and put on a headset. My wife's watching the news. I'm sort of present with her, and I choose to do that so that I can do some other things that are of value to me during the day. And that sort of helps my work-life balance. I get the life part is me getting to do some things during daylight hours, and I choose to do that. I don't do that every day. That would be bad. But the ability to do that once in a while, I think, is a nice thing as well.
When I have a mental block, I'll go and I'll, do the laundry, or I'll go, get the mail. I have a retired neighbor, and so he knows when I have like a big project that's very like mind bending, because I'll be out in the backyard with the cats, or I'll be doing something. He'll see me and he's like, okay, what's going on? Let's talk about something, distract you for a little bit, so then when I come back, it's like the light bulb comes on, everything's clicking again, I can get back into my tasks.
I I've had that.
Change of scenery there's something magical about change of scenery. There's a coffee shop I go to when I want to write. I can't write at home. I can write there. Something different, fewer distractions. I'm here to work. I don't know what it is, but I really appreciate all those perspectives. Anything else before we kind of move on to the final little test question? Okay. It's not
Some
a test
of my
question.
best strategy work for products is when we go to our summer house in Denmark. We have it's not a beach house, but it's a similar thing. So there are trees there you can sit out. My wife will maybe sleep in, and I will sit in the garden and with a notebook, and suddenly it just and within a couple of hours I have laid out a strategy for the next year of whatever it is. And that's where because I'm surrounded by like blue sky and nothing around me distracts, and then suddenly that just channels into the way I do strategy work for product.
Yeah, I make a motion that the next time this group's to do a podcast, we do it there at Kenny's summer house in Denmark. I think that's only fair.
I'll second
perfect.
that.
Thank you. Okay.
Sounds better than Fargo.
Yeah, for sure. No offense to Fargo.
No.
Hashtag, hey, at Fargo Chamber of Commerce. No offense. Yeah, there we go. We got it in. Terrific. Hey, think about this. Here's the hypothetical situation I'm putting you all into. You've been nominated by the remote workers of the world to give a TED Talk, and the audience is skeptical C-level CEOs, CFOs, general managers who think that the only way to get work done is 5 days a week in an office. And I would like you, if you're game, like what would you say to this sort of slightly skeptical audience of business leaders to try to change their mind from a personal standpoint? Just a short little like headline. I've got one, but who wants to? I know, like I'm just throwing you curveballs. By the way, Kenny, this is when you put the top spin on it like that. That's a curveball.
Okay. Yeah, that must be an American thing with some basketball.
Baseball. All right, baseball. You're so close. Good try. Anyway, anyone want to take a stab at what's your introductory couple of sentences to kind of grab their attention and change their minds? Anyone?
I'll start. So, if it's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I got that. Now I do it. I'm doing it. So, I would challenge them in the following way. If you only are surrounded by people who work in the office 9 to 5, that's also the kind of diversity you get in your workforce. That's the kind of ideas you get into your products, into everything.
Well said.
And if you look at the population around you, especially with younger generations, the type of workers you can get or who would accept this type of company is going to be maybe 5 to 10%. So that means your talent pool is suddenly restricted by 90%. And if you want your company to survive in the competitive environment, you cannot afford that. That's simply economics of this. You will not get the talent that you need in order to beat your competitors.
Love it. Who's Tonya? Can I throw you up on stage? Are you ready for your little talk? Okay, go.
So being Midwest and working remotely, you're not bound to a location, so you have that wider talent pool. And I think also, if you're bound to a location, I applied for a job and they wanted me to come into the office, but everybody on my team was going to be in a different office. And I'm like, well, what's the point of me being in the office if all we're going to do is be on Teams meetings all the time? So I think location, it doesn't really matter where you are. It's who's in your talent pool, and, they'll do their work wherever they see fit.
Awesome. Terrific. Darrick, throw to you.
Yeah, so I would say look at, if you're this far into the discussion, you know that you can work remotely, because if you couldn't, we learned through COVID who just couldn't in about 3 weeks, right? Your examples, manufacturing, police officers, obviously you have to be here. So we're talking about knowledge workers. So you know that it's at least possible. And then I would look at we're all comfortable, whether we like it or not, with these ideas of offshoring, outsourcing. If there's another vendor that comes in and says, I can do all this work for you at a lower cost and I can hire people to do it from some other place. So you can do that yourself, and you can do that you can expand and have you said, national hiring footprint without any capital cost to go into those other markets. You don't need the capital you have now for office space, or at least not as much of it. So I think there's some big macro things there of a much larger hiring pool, lower cost, and better employee experience that's attractive. So
awesome. Good. Mark?
Jeepers, the perfect points, right? When there's a lot of benefits, but the ones that I think would resonate best we've already said, right? You get the better people, and you get the best out of them. Honestly, do you want people that are satisfied at this point going in and dealing with that commute and the drudgery and all of that, and pulling from such a small talent pool? No. So.
Yeah, terrific.
All really well said. Yep.
Here's what I would say. I would say pull up a map, put a map up on the wall of your corporate location, put a pin in it. Draw a circle about 45 minutes radius of that location.
Right.
And now you're going to draw you've all said this. You're going to say, like, we're going to hire only from here. At another TED Talk that's friendly to remote work, they are saying we're going to hire from that circle and everywhere else in America to get the best talent.
Yeah.
Now, do you think you're going to survive into the future, or do you think they're going to survive into the future?
Yeah.
And my money's on them. By the way, I have a thing like a commute of more than an hour is immoral. Like, it's just immoral. So anyway, yeah, I would say, like, it's survive or die in the future. Boomers retiring like this, birth decline over the last 30 years like this, workforce shrinking. You're not going to be able to hire near yourself like you think you are. Not the best talent, to Kenny's point and other points. Well done. Man, I think the C-level skeptics are sad they ever stepped into our TED Talk. For sure. We've given them a lot to think about, as have you given me a lot to think about and a lot for our audience to think about. Any final thoughts before we sign off from the pod? Anyone? Bueller? Dead silence. Everyone said,
I will say one thing that I miss from being in person that you could replicate is the branding of who you work for, that you're always going to an office with the nameplate over the door and your kids see where you go. So send us some swag. Give us a sweatshirt and a backpack that has a company name on it.
Yes.
So we have that identity, and I think that's something I think will help.
Just a craven request for more swag from Darrick to close out the thoughty philosopher podcast that we were going for. Way to just bring us down into the mud in the last moment. Anyway, Tonya, Mark, Kenny, thank you for being guests on the podcast. Wonderful to have you. Darrick, as always, thank you for co-hosting. We look forward to getting this out to the masses and seeing what the reaction is. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Great to see you all.